What's up guys, Lou here for Golf Avenue and we're back with another comparison test. This time we're taking on one of golf's most beloved brand, Ping. So you know the routine around here, we're gonna go pick up our clubs, go to the sim, try them out, and then we'll come back right behind this desk to take a closer look at the data we'll have gathered. Ready or not, let's go pick up our clubs. But as always, let's address the questions that we want to answer with this test. First up, we want to know which driver is best suited to the needs of beginner golfers. Second, we want to know which driver offers the best boom for your buck. And third, we want to know how do older models compare to the latest and greatest on the market from Ping. But now that we've got all of our clubs, let's head to the sim and test them out. Alright guys, we've made it to the sim. I've got my clubs behind me. We're just about to get started with our test. Just as a reminder, we will be hitting about 10 good drives with each one of them. I'll come back and give you my feedback after each one. And then once we're done gathering our data, we'll head back to the sim and review the whole thing. So let's go test our club. And first up in line, we've got the Ping G30. Alright, so I just got done with the Ping G30. I have to say that the sound was very surprising. It was a very loud ping, just as the brand name says. Honestly, it was a little louder than most Ping drivers, but it was very, very noticeable. That's why I'm mentioning it. Otherwise, in terms of performance, very, very, very consistent. Once I got the hang of it, at first it was a little hard to produce what I wanted, but once I got the hang of what I wanted, very consistent draws starting in the center, finishing just a bit inside on the left. I hit a few straighter ones that didn't cut, but nevertheless, those were just longer bombs that were very straight. So overall, very, very impressed by this one. Takes a second to get used to it, but the Ping G30 was very impressive to me. So I'm excited to try more recent models and actually try our oldest model as well. So I just finished testing the G25, the oldest model in our list today. A few things right off the bat. The club face feels like it's massive. It feels like I was hitting a hockey stick off the tee rather than a regular golf club. Felt like Happy Gilmore over there. Distance-wise, it wasn't maybe as consistent as the G30. Some drives were the longest ones I've hit so far today, but also had much shorter ones. The consistency wasn't as there as much. In terms of dispersion and forgiveness, gotta tip it off to the G25. The dispersion wasn't as bad at all. Maybe 2 or 3 drives that were out of line and that would have ended up in the rough usually. Otherwise, anything else would have been in the fairway and very straight. So hats off to the G25, the oldest model today. Now we're moving on to our second most recent, the G425 Max. So we just finished testing a G425 Max. Right off the bat, I have to say that it took me a while to get used to that one, longer than any of the other drivers we've tried out so far. Once I did figure it out though, I have to say that it performed quite well, better than I expected actually. The only downside I have to give it is that it's not as forgiving as I thought it would be, considering that it's a Max variation of a Ping model. I would expect it to be extremely forgiving even on off-center strikes. While I have to say that the off-center strikes were not totally out of line, they did lose out on a bit of distance, and that's where you'll hurt the most. But credit to the G425 Max, I hit my longest drive of the day so far with it, and I was also able to be very consistent, actually in like a 10 yards diameter sort of zone that I was able to put my regular strikes into. So if you're able to be regular off the tee, not necessarily the best driver, just regular and produce your strike over and over again, you'll have a lot of success with that one. So I just finished testing the G410 Plus. I have to say that this driver didn't take me as much of time to get adapted to as some of the other ones that we tested already. It was extremely, extremely, extremely forgiving. Anytime I felt like I was missing the sweet spot or hitting the ball way too off far center, the results were still very good and the club was impressively still forgiving. What I will say though is that in terms of dispersion, either on the sides or in terms of distance, long and short, it was probably the most chaotic one, if you will. The balls did tend to go a bit everywhere. I was able to keep him relatively straight most of the time, but in terms of distance and pushing it a bit on the right edge and the left edge, maybe not the best one overall. So the G410 Plus is definitely the most forgiving driver I've tried out so far today, but coming up, I've got perhaps the most forgiving driver of the last 5 years, the G430 Max 10K. So for our last driver, the Ping G430 Max 10K, I have to say it lived up to its name. It was incredibly forgiving. Most of my drives ended up in a very, very tight circle. Even the strikes where I was not as good maybe, or there was user error on the club, the penalty was not as bad as it was with some of the other clubs I tried out today. Actually, my worst strikes weren't that bad at all with that one. My worst ones were again only a result of human error. So as long as you're able to make decent contact and get the ball in the air with that club, you're sure to get a result that will at least leave you satisfied with your next shot. But that wraps it up for our testing session. Now we're gonna head back to the FC, look at the stats a little closer and see which one came out on top. So distance-wise, we won't have a surprise here. The most recent of all of our drivers, the G430 Max 10K, came out on top in both the total and carry distance department. However, we do have to tip our cap to the G410 Plus model, came out more than 5 years ago, and it still closely rivals the G430 Max 10K. And I have to say that I was a bit disappointed by the G425 Max since it benefited from the highest swing speed. I was expecting a lot from it, but it did not end up on top. Speaking of swing speed, I was able to maintain the same range of swing speed for all the clubs that we tested out, but we need to mention that some of them were not as good at transferring the energy into the golf ball. In terms of ball speed, the G30 was very impressive, coming out on top of all the other clubs in this test, and we have to keep in mind that this driver came out 10 years ago. On the other hand, the G25, which was released more than 10 years ago at this point, did not manage to keep up with the other clubs and did show a bit of its age. But here again, the G430 Max 10K manages to shine as it turned the slowest club speed average into what were very respectable ball speed numbers for this test. So let's quickly discuss spin rates, because most of the clubs in this test, in my opinion, were in a very acceptable range. The spin rates from the G425 Max were probably just a touch too high in my opinion. If they had been slightly lower, the club would have probably ended up on top of the overall test when it came to the total distance. But now that we've taken a closer look at the data, it's finally time to answer the questions that we posed at the start of this video. First off, we wanted to know which driver is best suited for beginner golfers. So it goes without saying, but we have to give the crown to the G430 Max 10K. Obviously, it's all a beginner golfer could ever want or need contained inside a single club head. But we know the price tag is not to everyone's liking, and for that reason, we had our second question, which was, which driver will provide you with the best boom for your buck? And in that department, the crown goes to the G410 Plus. It combines an affordable price with incredible performances, perfect for beginners on a budget. And last but not least, we wanted to know how older models stack up to the latest and greatest on the market. Well, a quick look at the chart will show that the G25 would have probably been able to match the G430 Max 10K's performance and output had it just benefited from slightly higher ball speed. And despite its small issues when it comes to transferring energy into the golf ball, the G25 still managed to trump the G425. So that's a great testament to how older drivers still manage to perform well when it comes to Ping models. But that wraps it up for today's test. As usual, make sure to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to share it with a fan of Ping. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you to subscribe to Golf Avenue channel and help us grow this gorgeous community that we're all a part of. And of course, as always, for Golf Avenue, I've been Lou. Until next time.